So today we're going to be tying a very classic pattern. We'll be tying the Mercury Sparkle Wing RS2, originally developed by Rim Chung. Was designed specifically for the South Platte. Can imitate any mayfly species just by changing the color of your thread and dubbing and the size of the hook. What we have on the vise right now is a TMCO 101. This is a size 22, as we are going to be tying a blue wing olive imitation. So it'll be in an olive color. We also have a mid-sized silver lined Mercury bead. That silver lined Mercury bead is an important aspect of this pattern. Don't go for the just standard Mercury. The thread we're going to be using is Simperfly Nano Silk 18/0 in olive. I only use this thread on my RS2s. I don't use anything else because it is so thin and lays extremely flat. It helps to keep a very slim profile that we're going for. And so with that, we'll get started here. We're just going to tie on our thread, a few wraps, and cut the excess. If you haven't tied with this nano silk before, it takes a little getting used to. It's so durable that it's actually kind of hard to cut off. You'll get the feel of it. So we're going to take our thread back to, right about the hook point. The next thing we're going to do here is tie in our tails. There's a few different options with tails. It's really just a preference thing. You can either use Whiting Farms tailing feathers, which are phenomenal. I use them all the time on a lot of different mayfly patterns. Or if you want to keep it more traditional, like Rim Chung's original pattern, you can use tailing fibbits. That's what I like to do. So what we're going to do here is we're going to give our thread a little clockwise spin to tighten it. And then we're going to tie these fibbits right on top of the hook. Give it a few wraps to capture it. And then we're going to pull them to length. I like my mayfly tails a little longer than shorter, probably a little bit more than a hook length. If you ever look at a mayfly, they have extremely long tails. So I try to replicate that the best I can. So we're going to take our thread back to basically right at the barb. And the next thing we're going to do here is we are going to lock down and split our tails, which is what you'll notice on a mayfly is those nice split tails that you see. So there's 3 steps to this. It's really simple. It takes a little bit of practice to get the feel of. So the first thing we're going to do is simply bring our thread right underneath the tails, and then another wrap to lock that in. That just props them up. Nothing tricky there. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to take our thread between the tails. Now the first wrap will be that near tail, and then we take another thread wrap to lock that, and then we're going to make another wrap between the tails to the far side, and then another wrap to lock that in. And so what you'll see here is we've got that nice split tail, just like a mayfly. We're going to bring the thread back. And just trim the excess tailing fibbit material. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to bring our thread back to right at about that hook point again. And then we're going to use some olive, blue wing olive super fine dubbing. What's really critical here and where I see a lot of mistakes is over dubbing this fly, making it too bulky. We want to keep this thing extremely sparse, very lean profile. So when you're getting your dubbing, really the goal here should be to get the absolute least amount possible to just barely coat your thread. You can see here, that is barely any dubbing on my thread. And so we're going to bring it back, and then we're going to build a very small taper. And I actually don't, that was a little too much dubbing for my liking. You'll probably have to redub a couple times here because we're using such a small amount. And don't be lazy on this step. If you don't like, you know, how your taper is looking, or if it's a little too bulky as you're building it out, just go back, fix it. It makes a big difference. So get a little bit more dubbing on here. Keep building that small taper. And we basically take that taper to about a bead length back from the bead. The next thing we're going to do here is tie in our wing. That's going to be Prism White Glamour Madeira number 8. If you can't find this, let me know. I'll send you some free Glamour Madeira, no problem. We've got tons of it. So once again, we're going to give our bobbin a little clockwise turn to tighten the thread and capture this. Oh, missed it. Happens. And then pull it back and just secure it with a handful more wraps. Bring it back to about that, you know, bead length back. So the next thing we're going to do is dub the thorax, cover that work we just did. Once again, keep this really slim. Don't overdub this. You want the dubbing to be about the exact same size as this bead. Little trick here. I see people all the time with a gap between the body and then the thorax from the tie-in point. So the first thing I like to do here is take some wraps with my dubbing, basically directly underneath that tie-in point to make sure there's not that gap there. Add a little more dubbing. Now I like to really pack this dubbing hard on the head. If you don't, you'll end up with another little gap between the bead and where you tie off, and it just doesn't look good. A little bit more. Always ends up being a little bit more than you think here. But still keep your dubbing noodle very sparse. It's better to have to add more dubbing than try to take it off. And so you can see that dubbing on the thorax is about the exact same size of the bead. And then we're just going to whip finish. With this nano silk, you can whip finish 100 times and it's still easy to cut off. Give that thread a little tug backwards to make sure it's nice and locked in. And then the final step is just cutting your Glamour Madeira. So we like to take that basically back to the hook bend is a good marker for that length. And we're just gonna spruce it up a little bit. And that's it. That's your Mercury Sparkle Wing RS2. Really simple. Tie it in a variety of colors and sizes to imitate any mayfly species. Have fun.